Take a deep breath with me. In and out. Now imagine this. The crackle of fire in the night, a sound that could mean warmth in some worlds, but here it means war. Flames rise not from hearts, but from cane fields, and shadows stretch long across the earth. Shadows of women and men who refuse to bow. And in the front of them all, silhouetted against red smoke, stands not a man, but a woman, a warrior, forgotten by history, but remembered in blood. Her machete gleams in the night. Her eyes burn brighter than the fire behind her. She is not a side note in someone else's story. She is a story. Pause with me here. Because everything you think you know about slave revolts, about rebellions, about defiance, you've probably imagined men. Men with blades, men with torches, men leading the charge. But the truth, buried under centuries of silence, is that women were there too. Women carried not only water and whispers, but weapons. Women did not only endure chains, they broke them. They stood at the center of revolts that shook the very foundations of empire. And yet, history wrote them out. Their names erased, their deeds minimized, their courage hidden under layers of dust. Tonight, we brush away that dust. Tonight, we remember the forgotten warrior. Let's set the stage. It is the late 18th century. The Caribbean and Brazil pulse with wealth, well drawn from the blood of the enslaved. Sugar is white gold. Coffee the fuel of European mornings. Cotton the fabric of empires. Ships cross the Atlantic endlessly. Their holds filled not with goods, but with people. Men, women, and children torn from Africa, packed into spaces smaller than coffins, surviving or not surviving. The nightmare of the Middle Passage. When they arrive, they are thrown into a world built to devour them. Fields stretch endless. Overseers ride on horseback. Whips crack like thunder, and the air itself smells of sweat, blood, and cane. To Europeans, the colonies are jewels. Saint-Domingue called the Pearl of the Antilles, Brazil's Bahia a crown of sugar. But beneath the glitter lies rot. 500,000 enslaved souls in Saint-Domingue alone. Millions more across Brazil, Cuba, Jamaica, the American South. And within this sea of suffering, women carried double chains. Enslaved as laborers, enslaved as bodies, enslaved as wombs to reproduce more labor. They cooked, they cut cane, they carried water, they bore children, they endured assaults that leave scars far deeper than flesh. Yet in this crucible, women also found ways to resist. Sometimes in whispers, sometimes in poison, sometimes in open flame. Picture it, nightfall on a plantation. The fields stretch quiet. The overseers drink in the mansion. The church bells have long since stopped ringing. But in the slave quarters, beneath thatched roofs, women gather. They hum songs in Yoruba, in Kikongo, in Yu. They braid each other's hair in patterns that carry secret meanings. They whisper of escape routes, of planned uprisings, of spirits that watch over them. And sometimes, those whispers turn to vows. Vows that the next sunrise will not find them bent under whips, but standing with blades. This is where our warrior emerges. She does not come from wealth, nor from books, nor from power. She comes from the fields. Her skin darkened by sun, her hands scarred by cane, her voice strong from songs that carried more defiance than prayers ever did. She has seen children dragged to dungeons, seen men whipped until their backs split open, seen women broken in silence. She has lost family to ships, to sickness, to chains. And somewhere deep inside, the line snaps. She decides, no more. But let us pause, because to understand her courage, you must understand the odds she faced. Slave revolts were the greatest fear of every colony. Armies of soldiers, militias, dogs, guns, all stood ready to crush any sign of rebellion. The punishment for conspiracy was death, slow and public. Bodies hung on gibbets, heads displayed on spikes. Entire families destroyed to set examples. To rise against this was to embrace death. And yet, she rose. She and countless other women whose names we may never know, but whose defiance still echoes and whispers through history. Imagine her walking into a secret meeting in the forest, the moonlight barely touching the clearing. Men speak in low tones, debating weapons, routes, strategies. But when she speaks, silence falls. She does not beg to be included. She commands. Her knowledge of the land, her courage in the face of danger, her voice that carries both fire and calm. These make her a leader, and so, against the grain of empire and patriarchy alike, she takes her place at the front. Now close your eyes again. See her not as a myth, but as flesh and blood, her breath quick with anticipation, her heart steady with rage. The machete in her hand is heavy, but she grips it like it was always meant to be there. Around her, others wait, men, women, children. Their eyes find hers, and in her gaze they see not only defiance, but permission. Permission to believe that freedom is possible. This is how revolutions begin. Not always with declarations, not always with documents, but with a woman refusing to bow, with one spark in the night, with fire that leaps from cane field to cane field until it consumes the empire. Pause here with me again, because as you listen, I want you to feel this not as a story of the past, but as a question for present. What does it mean when history forgets women like her? What does it mean when half of the story is erased? And what happens when we dare to remember, to speak their names aloud, even if those names were stolen? History trembles, silence cracks, and through those cracks, forgotten warriors step into the light. Her revolt, her story, is not the only one. Across the Americas, women led. In Jamaica, in Bahia, in Suriname, in Saint-Domingue, names whisper like Sanite Belair, Nanny of the Maroons, Aquatune. Some recorded, many erased. But tonight, we place our forgotten warrior beside them, not as a shadow, but as flame, not as a footnote, but as a chapter. Her machete gleams, her voice echoes, and her defiance becomes ours. This is the beginning of her story, and it is only the beginning. Dawn breaks, but for the enslaved, dawn is not beginning, it is continuation. The rooster crows, not as a herald of life, but as a reminder that chains never sleep. And for women, dawn means double weight, in the darkness before light. She wakes on a dirt floor, her child pressed against her ribs, her body still aching from yesterday's labor. The air is thick with smoke from embers barely alive in the hearth, and outside, the overseer's voice already cuts the morning like a blade. She ties a strip of cloth around her waist, lifts her child, hands the little one to an older woman too sick for the fields. And then she walks into the rising sun with a machete in her hands. Not a weapon yet, but a tool. The cane stalks loom taller than her shoulders, sharp edges slicing her skin as she works. Sweat beads on her forehead before the sun even clears the horizon. Every swing of the blade tears flesh from her palms. Around her, men grunt, children stumble with loads too heavy. Overseers ride horses with whips coiled like snakes ready to strike. This is her life, a life designed to break not only the body but the soul. And yet within this grind, she resists in ways small, silent, and secret. She hums songs not in French, not in Portuguese, not in the language of masters, but in the tongue of ancestors. Songs that carry fragments of Africa, fragments of memory, fragments of hope. Songs that remind those bent beside her that they are not beasts, not shadows, not property. They are people. When the sun climbs higher, so does the weight. She carries buckets of water to men who cut deeper into the cane, her shoulders bowing under burdens meant for bodies twice her size. The overseer shouts. A child drops a stalk, and the whip lashes across small skin. She turns her head, bites her lip, forces herself not to scream. Because screams bring punishment, because silence keeps survival. But inside her, silence turns into fire. At noon, the field sways with shimmering heat. Backs bend, hands blister, breaths ragged. She watches the canes shimmer like blades themselves, an army of stalks standing taller than towers, endless, suffocating. And in that moment, the cane no longer looks like sugar. It looks like prison bars. She knows the sweetness will never touch her lips, only the bitterness of labor. She sees white ships on the horizon sometimes, carrying barrels of sugar, sacks of coffee, bound for Europe. She knows they call it wealth, luxury, civilization. But for her, every grain is a drop of blood, every spoonful a tear stolen from her people. Evening comes, but rest does not. She returns to the quarters where firelight flickers dimly. There, she cooks thin porridge, shares scraps with children, washes wounds with hands that tremble but do not fail. And in the quiet moments, when overseers retreat and stars scatter across the night sky, the whispers begin. Women lean close, voices low, eyes darting toward the door. They speak of punishments, of beatings, of children dragged into dungeons. They speak of the day someone dropped poison into a master's cup, of the day someone set fire to a field at midnight, of men who fled into forests and never returned. And then they speak of something more dangerous still, the day when silence ends, the day when machetes cut not cane, but chains, the day when torches light not hearths, but mansions. She listens. She does not tremble. She does not bow her head. She nods once, slow, deliberate, and in that nod, the first seed of her rebellion takes root. But let us step deeper into the layers of her world, because rebellion does not bloom in one night. It grows from pain watered over years, from injustice pressed too far. And for women, the weight is unbearable. Their bodies are not their own. Masters take them at will, claiming ownership not only of their labor, but of their flesh. Children born from those violations are torn from their arms, sold away, erased from their lives. Imagine the cruelty. To give birth only to lose, to nurse only to have the child taken, to rock emptiness instead of life. Yet even in this cruelty, resistance survives. Some women hide herbs in their skirts. Secret knowledge carried from Africa, knowledge of plants that heal and plants that harm. Some whisper recipes of leaves that end pregnancies forced upon them. Some slip powders into master's food, slow poison that cannot be traced. Their bodies may be controlled, but their spirits plot vengeance. She learns from them. She listens when older women whisper about roots dug at night, about leaves gathered in secret. She learns that the earth itself becomes ally, that fields meant to enslave can also offer tools of rebellion. The plantation is a battlefield disguised as a farm, and every stalk, every root, every shadow is a weapon waiting for the right moment. Still, she waits, she watches, she endures, because rebellion cannot be born of impulse alone. It requires timing, secrecy, unity. And she knows that when the moment comes, hesitation means death. She sharpens her courage like a blade. Picture her at midnight, walking barefoot into the forest. The moon spills silver over ground. Branches crackle under her steps. She carries nothing but determination. She kneels in a clearing, presses her palms into the dirt, whispers names of ancestors. She calls on spirits she barely remembers but still believes watch over her. She whispers not for survival, but for strength. She whispers for fire, for freedom, for vengeance. And in the silence, the forest answers, not in words, but in the rush of wind, in the cry of an owl, in the beating of her own heart. This is how resistance begins, not with armies, but with whispers in the dark, not with cannons, but with courage too heavy to be silenced. Above ground, the masters drink wine in their parlors, speak of prophets, toast of Europe. Below, in the fields, in the forests, in the dungeons, another world hums, a world waiting, burning, building. And at the center of it stands her, the woman history forgot, the warrior history erased, but the leader her people will one day follow. She does not yet know the shape of the revolt. She does not yet see the flames that will rise. But she knows this. The day is coming when her machete will no longer cut cane. The day is coming when her voice will no longer whisper. The day is coming when the silence will break. And when it does, the world will tremble. The plantation sleeps. But sleep is never true on land watered with blood. In the great house, masters dream of profits in Paris, of fine clothes and sugar markets. In the quarters, bodies collapse in exhaustion, but minds stay awake. Whispers coil through the night like smoke, passing from ear to ear, from soul to soul. She sits in the corner of a dim hut, her face half lit by firelight. Around her, a circle of men and women lean close, shadows long against the walls. Their words are soft, but their eyes burn. They speak of lashes that split backs open, of children taken, of dungeons that swallow the living whole. They speak of men hanged at the crossroads as warnings. And then she speaks. Her voice is not loud, but it carries. It cuts through the air sharper than the crack of a whip. She says, "We are already dead to them. What more can they take? If we stay silent, our children will die in chains. If we rise, we may die, but we may also live free. Silence follows, heavy, trembling. Then, slowly, heads nod. Whispers of assent pass like sparks. A pact is formed, not with ink or parchment, but with breath and blood. The meetings continue in secret. Sometimes in fields after midnight, sometimes in forests where drums beat softly against tree trunks, the rhythm muffled by leaves. The drums are not music alone. They are code, a language of defiance. A certain rhythm means gather. Another means danger. Another means the time has come. She learns to read these rhythms, to lead with them. She becomes more than worker, more than mother, more than victim. She becomes strategist. She maps the plantation in her mind. Where the overseers sleep, where weapons are kept, where fire can spread fastest. She memorizes routes through forests, hidden paths across rivers, signals that can travel in the night unseen. Weapons are scarce. Machetes sharpened not for cane, but for flesh. Pestles turned into clubs. Stones wrapped in cloth, set aflame. Poison mixed into water to weaken guards. Every object becomes potential, every shadow a shield. But weapons are not enough. She knows fear is both enemy and ally. The masters have ruled by fear for centuries. To overturn them, she must turn fear back upon them. So she speaks to her people not only of anger, but of destiny. She reminds them of Africa, of ancestors who were kings and queens, warriors and healers. She tells them that blood spill will not vanish. It will feed the roots of freedom. She transforms pain into prophecy. And then the night arrives. The air is thick, heavy, swollen with storm clouds. The overseers drink in the big house, their laughter sharp against the dark. She gathers with her people at the edge of the fields. Torches flicker, machetes gleam faintly, breaths come fast. The youngest tremble, but her eyes steady them. She raises her arm, the blade catching firelight. For a moment, time itself holds its breath. Then she drops her arm. The cane fields ignite. Flames leap like spirits freed, devouring stalks that once cut skin. Smoke rolls into the sky, red and black. Overseers rush in their beds, but before they can shout, blades fall. The mansion doors burst open and fire pours in. Masters scream, their silk gowns catching flames faster than tinder. Horses rear, dogs bark, the world turns to chaos. She moves through it all like fire-given flesh. Her machete arcs, her voice rises. She shouts commands, and people follow. They burn ledgers where their names were reduced to numbers. They break chains kept for punishment. They tear down whips and trample them into mud. The revolt spreads faster than the flames. Nearby plantations see the smoke and know. Some masters flee before the fire reaches them. Some fight and fall. Some enslaved, too frightened to join, still whisper prayers for those who dared. And those who dared grow in number with each passing hour. By dawn, the landscape is unrecognizable. Where once canes swayed in neat rows, now only ash smolders. Where once the mansion stood white and proud, only ruins glow. Where once silence ruled, now cries of freedom echo. Pause here. Picture the horizon at first light, ash drifting through the air like snow. Silhouettes of men and women standing tall, machetes in hand. Smoke curling behind them, and at their center, she stands, eyes fierce, face streaked with soot and sweat. Hair clinging to her forehead, a warrior born not in palace but in chain. News spreads faster than any ship. Colonists wake in towns miles away and smell smoke on the wind. Soldiers are summoned, militias armed. The revolt is no longer rumor. It is reality. And at its heart is the unthinkable, a woman leading the charge. The masters call it savagery. The officials call it rebellion. She calls it survival. Her people call it hope. But hope comes with cost. Blood pools in courtyards. Friends fall. Children cry in smoke-filled air. She does not weep, not yet. There is no time for tears. There's only time for fire. Because fire spreads, and with it spreads the truth. The chains are not unbreakable. At dawn, the smoke is still rising. The smell of ash clings to the wind, thick with the sweetness of sugar burning into bitterness. For miles, the horizon is scarred red and black. Birds scatter from the fields, their wings catching sparks. And in the ruins, the rebels breed not as slaves, but as fighters. But freedom, even for a night, is fragile. By mid-morning, word has reached the nearest garrisons. Bells toll in towns. Soldiers march. Muskets are loaded, bayonets fixed. Riders gallop with orders, their hooves pounding urgency into the earth. The colony's rulers know they cannot allow the fire to spread unchecked. They summon not only soldiers but fear itself, the oldest weapon of empire. The first clashes come quickly. Rebels armed with machetes and torches face soldiers with muskets and sabers. Gunfire cracks through the smoke, scattering rebels who have never before faced lines of steel. Bodies fall. Some flee into forests, some vanish into swamps, but many fight until the end. Because for them, the choice is not between life and death, but between dying free or dying chained. And in the center of the chaos, she does not retreat. She moves like flame across the battlefield, her voice carrying above gunfire, urging her people forward. She has no armor, no horse, no regiment, but she has presence. Every time her blade rises, others rise with her. Every time she shouts, fear breaks. For a moment, even soldiers hesitate, stunned at the sight of a woman leading with such ferocity. But the Empire does not hesitate for long. Cannons are dragged into fields. The ground shakes with thunder. Entire huts collapse under fire, sending debris across the earth. Children scream, elders stumble, the rebels scatter. Yet she stands, rallying survivors, guiding them into forests where soldiers fear to follow. For weeks, the struggle continues. Soldiers burn fields, rebels set ambushes. At night, torches flare in distant hills. By day, smoke trails rise like signals across the horizon. The colony is no longer orderly rows of cane. It is battlefield, scar, memory in the making. But empires are relentless. They hunt not just the many, but the one. They know revolts are not only fought with blades, but with symbols. And she has become a symbol. The story spread faster than flames. A woman with eyes like fire leading men into battle, a warrior who defied masters and soldiers alike. Her name is whispered with reverence, with fear, with hope. The masters fear her not only because of what she has done, but because of what she represents. If women can rise, if mothers can lead, then no chain is safe. They decide she must be crushed, not just defeated, but erased. And so the hunt begins. Rewards are posted. Traitors are tempted. Informants whisper in exchange for survival. Armies scour forests, burn villages, interrogate captives. The colony turns into net, and she is the prey they seek. But she is not easy to find. She moves like shadow, guided by the land itself. She hides in caves, slips through rivers, vanishes in cane fields at night. She leads raids on plantations, strikes at soldiers, disappears before dawn. To her people, she becomes legend alive. To her enemies, she becomes ghost. Still, ghosts can be cornered. One night, rain lashes the land. Soldiers, tipped off by betrayal, surround the forest where she hides. Muskets gleam in torchlight, dogs snarl, chains rattle in anticipation. She knows escape is impossible. Her people beg her to flee, to vanish deeper into shadows. She refuses. Instead, she steps forward, her machete in one hand, her other raised to still the cries of her companions. She does not tremble. She does not bow. She faces the soldiers as though they are not hunters, but witnesses. The battle that follows is not fair. It is not meant to be. Muskets crack, torches flare, the forest shakes. Her people fall one by one, but she fights until her body will no longer move. Blood streaks her arms, sweat blinds her eyes, but still she raises her blade. When it finally falls from her hand, it is not surrender. It is sacrifice, captured. She is bound in chains heavier than the ones she once carried in fields. Soldiers drag her through towns, displaying her like trophy, proof that rebellion has been crushed. Crowds are forced to watch. Masters declare, "See what happens when slaves rise. See what happens when women defy." But what they do not see is how her presence changes everything. Children watch with wide eyes and do not forget. Elders bow their heads not in submission, but in mourning that will become memory. Her people whisper her name, refusing to let it die. In prison, she waits. Soldiers jeer. Priests demand repentance. Officials demand names. She gives none. She speaks only once, and her words burn hotter than fire. You can chain my body, but you cannot chain the spirit of my people. For every one of us you kill, 10 will rise. The trial is swift, a mockery. The verdict is decided before the first word is spoken. Guilty of rebellion, guilty of defiance, guilty of being too dangerous to forget. The sentence is death. But death does not always mean silence. The day of her execution dawns bright, cruel in its beauty. Crowds gather in the square. Soldiers line the streets. Priests chant prayers. She is led forward in chains, her step steady, her eyes unbowed. Some say her gaze alone silenced the jeers of masters. Some say children in the crowd began to hum the song she once sang in fields. Some say the air itself grew heavy, as though the world knew it was about to witness something eternal. She does not beg. She does not cry. She lifts her chin, looks at the horizon, and speaks. I die as I lived fighting. Remember me not as a slave, but as a warrior. The blade falls. The crowd gasps. And in that instant, her body is broken, but her story is born. For the masters, it is victory. For her people, it is resurrection. Her name passes into whispers, then into songs, then into legend. The very thing the Empire sought to erase becomes immortal. Pause here. Picture the scene after the crowd disperses. The square still stained with blood. The chains still warm from her body. The silence heavy, but not empty. Because in the silence, something lingers, something the Empire cannot kill. A memory, a seed, a promise. From that day on, the image of a woman with a blade in her hand and fire in her eyes travels further than soldiers ever could. Across plantations, across colonies, across oceans, her defiance becomes symbol. She is no longer flesh, no longer bound. She is spirit carried in whispers and dreams. And history, though it tried to bury her, cannot. The square grows silent after her execution, but silence is never empty. It carries echoes. Whispers seep into streets, into fields, into the very soil that had once drunk her blood. And those whispers grow. They are carried by the enslaved who saw her die, by children who clutched their mother's skirts that day, by elders who bowed their heads and memorized her last words. She became more dangerous in death than she had ever been in life. For though her body was gone, her story could not be chained. By night, in huts lit by embers, her name was spoken softly, like a prayer. Women sang lullabies weaving her courage into their children's dreams. Men sharpened blades by firelight and whispered, "If she could rise, so can we." And when overseers passed by, silence fell, but the silence was alive with memory. Legends began to grow around her. Some said her eyes still glowed in the dark, guiding rebels through forests. Others claimed her blood, spilled in the square, left a mark on the ground that no rain could wash away. Stories stretched and bent, as stories always do, but all carried the same truth. She had defied chains, and that defiance had not died with her. The masters feared her ghost. They banned the mention of her name, forbade gatherings where songs could be sung, punished those who whispered her story. But suppression only made it stronger. The less it was allowed to be spoken, the more fiercely it was remembered. And the echo did not stop within one colony. Traders carried rumors across the sea. Sailors, often forced to serve in ships moving sugar and coffee, whispered her story in ports from Havana to Salvador, from Charleston to Kingston. Her defiance became cargo more dangerous than any weapon. In Brazil, whispers of her courage mixed with African traditions of warrior women, like the Dahomey Amazons. In Bahia, where Muslim enslaved communities planned a male revolt of 1835, her story was cited as proof that women, too, could lead armies blessed by faith. In Cuba, rebel leaders spoke of her as if she walked their fields, promising that her spirit fought alongside them. Even in North America, her shadow crossed plantations. Enslaved women in the American South, told to remain silent, began humming songs of resistance that carried echoes of her name. When Nat Turner's rebellion erupted in 1831, whispers claimed his visions were strengthened by stories of Caribbean uprisings, stories in which women had raised blades and refused submission. History books, of course, ignored her. They wrote of men, of generals, of battles, of treaties. Women were footnotes at best, erased at worst. But oral memory does not obey ink. Oral memory lives in rhythm, in breath, in lullabies and stories told under moonlight. And in that oral world, she never left. Pause here with me. Imagine sitting in a dark hut in the early 19th century. Outside, overseers patrol with whips and lanterns. Inside, an elder leans close to children and says, "There was once a woman who would not bow. She rose with fire in her hands. They tried to kill her, but she still walks with us in spirit." The children's eyes widen. Fear softens into courage. And in that moment, history is passed, not written, but lived. Her legacy became not only memory, but strategy. Rebels studied her defiance, learning from her sacrifice. They saw that symbols mattered as much as swords. That when a leader stood unbowed, even in chains, she became immortal. And so, in every revolt that followed, leaders carried more than weapons, they carried stories. Her story, the 19th century, became a century of echoes. In Jamaica, the Baptist War of 1831 to 32 saw tens of thousands rise in rebellion, singing hymns that doubled as codes for freedom. In Brazil, Quilombos, communities of escaped enslaved people, invoked the memory of warriors past to sustain their fight. And in Haiti, long after independence was won, women continued to claim her as an ancestor spirit, a reminder that liberty was not a man's achievement alone. Even European abolitionists, though hesitant, could not entirely escape her ghost. Pamphlets circulated describing the ferocious woman who led a band of rebels. Of course, they painted her with fear, not admiration. They used her as proof of savagery rather than courage. But hidden within their condemnation was the truth of her impact. She had terrified empires. Pause again. Let's turn the lens. What does it mean for an empire to fear a woman with a blade? Not an army, not a navy, but one woman who refused to bow? It means that the entire system of slavery, built on violence and wealth, was fragile enough to tremble at defiance. That is her true legacy, proof that power is never invincible. Her story also reveals something empires wanted buried, that women were not passive victims in slavery, but active resistors. They poisoned masters' food, they carried messages between rebels, they fought in open battle, they led revolts. Yet, history books chose silence, because to admit women as warriors was to shatter not only the myth of racial hierarchy, but of gender hierarchy too. And so, she became a double threat, a slave who defied and a woman who led. Her legend traveled into the 20th century as well. In Haiti, poets wrote her as La Femme de Feu, the woman of fire. In Brazil, storytellers in Quilombo-descendant communities wove her into oral epics. In the Caribbean, her presence lived in songs sung during harvests, where women leading chants evoke her as guide. Today, archaeologists uncover the physical remains of the world she lived in. Chains fuse a stone, punishment cells hidden beneath plantations. Historians recover fragments of names from archives, fragments that whisper of women erased. An activist, scholar, and artist resurrect her memory, insisting she be named not as ghost, but as ancestor. But even now, she is more than history. She is mirror. When women today march for justice, when marginalized voices demand space, her spirit is there. When protests erupt and chants echo through streets, she walks again, blade in hand, eyes unbowed. Let me ask you directly, what does her story mean to you? Not as distant history, but as reflection? Would you have stood beside her? Would you have carried her fire when the world demanded silence? Because that is her true power. She does not stay in the past. She asks you here and now, what chains will you break? Her legacy proves that freedom is not born in comfort, but in defiance. That even those history tries to erase can rise as symbols stronger than empires. That when one woman lifts a blade and refuses to bow, generations after her still hear the sound. And that sound is not silence. It is thunder, The story of the forgotten warrior does not end with her death, nor with the legends whispered after. It continues, because every time her name is spoken, every time her defiance is remembered, she rises again. But let's pause together, you and I. Take a breath, in and out. Now ask yourself, why was her story buried? Why do school books speak of generals and kings, but not of a woman who lifted a blade against empire? The answer is simple. Silence is power. To erase her was to erase the proof that women fought, that enslaved people resisted, that empires trembled at the courage of those they considered nothing. Erasure is as much a weapon as whips or chains. And history, written by victors, has always tried to wield it. Yet erasure never fully succeeds. The earth remembers. The people remember. Songs survive. Legends breathe. And when someone listens closely, when someone dares to tell the story again, the silence cracks. Imagine standing in the ruins of an old plantation. Above ground, crumbling walls. Beneath, dungeons carved in stone. Tourists pass, glancing briefly before moving on. But if you stop, if you close your eyes, you might hear it. The whispered chains, the murmur of prayers, the faint echo of a woman's voice, steady, unbroken. Her voice does not beg. It does not surrender. It commands, do not forget me. And so we remember, she is more than one woman. She is every mother who shielded her child from the lash. She is every daughter who carried messages between rebels. She is every sister who sang coded songs at night. She is every woman who fought, who bled, who refused to accept silence. Her story stands for them all, and remembering her matters not only for the past, but for the present, because the structures of slavery did not vanish with abolition. They mutated. They became economic shackles, racial hierarchies, prisons built of laws instead of stone. The fight she began is not over. That is why her defiance still resonates. Because every injustice today, every silence forced upon the powerless, echoes the silences of those underground dungeons. Every struggle for freedom today is another verse in her unfinished song. Let me draw you closer. Picture the flames of her revolt lighting not only a plantation, but the centuries beyond it. Each generation carries a spark. Each act of remembrance fans the embers. And if we forget, the fire dims. But if we remember, if we tell her story, the fire grows. Ask yourself now, what fire will you carry? Because history is not just facts in dusty books. It is responsibility. To tell the stories of those erased. To give voice to those silenced. To make sure the warrior who died with eyes unbowed does not vanish into the shadows of empire once more. Her question lingers. What chains will you break? Chains today may not be iron on wrists. They may be poverty, racism, inequality, silence. But the lesson remains. Chains can be broken. Empires can fall. Forgotten warriors can rise again if we speak their names. And so, as we close this story, do not treat it as the end. Treat it as a beginning. Carry it with you. Share it. Speak of it. Make sure others know. Because every time her story is told, she defies erasure once more. Pause with me for one final moment. Close your eyes. Hear the sound of chains clattering to the ground. Hear the rush of fire consuming cane fields. Hear the steady breath of a woman who refused to bow. That sound belongs to her, but also to you. And now, the call is yours. Freedom is never given. It is fought for, carried, remembered. Even those erased by history can rise again when we choose to remember them. Subscribe for more forgotten stories of slavery. What do you think about this hidden history? Leave your comment, because silence was a master's weapon. Memory is ours.